Good morning on the West Coast and good afternoon on the East Coast. Today is Wednesday, May 11th, and for those TV fans out there, happy National Twilight Day Zone. I'm John Yarrington, the CEO of the Partnership and Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and direct response advertising industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI team, it's my pleasure to welcome you back for yet another fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. And today we'll be joined by Meghan Glenn of Flowcode. Hi, Meghan.
Hey, how are you?
And we'll be talking about media device crossovers. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use the questions tab located in your control panel. Please also note, you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we will hold our replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. He's such a marketing hero. Batman watches Saturday morning cartoons about him. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business at Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency out of Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCS Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much, and take it away, my friend.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. And Meghan, thank you so much for joining us from Chicagoland. We really appreciate it. This is your second Take 20 in just about a handful of months, so we're glad to see you as a regular on the broadcast. So today, team, we're talking about media crossovers to devices. Manufacturing new devices is a multi-year process, and the development of new streaming services happen much more quickly than that. So the question is, how are these manufacturers and what kind of devices are going to be built for the future? Now, the 2022 CES show, a handful of months ago, revealed some TVs going down the path of engaging users in a way that streaming is going to be a part of those new smart TVs. So Samsung released a micro LED. It's an 89-inch, 101 and 110-inch models. These things are huge, massive screens that combine with streaming services releasing theatrical and in-home content at the same time, which we've seen over the past year, might lead to more in-home entertainment and more in-home advertising. So the questions that we're going to be talking about are, how are these devices being built for new services and new content? Will the hardware be able to keep up with the changing behavior patterns and consumer trends? Cars use Airplay alongside built-in media consoles, and now some devices are equipped with shoppable remotes. So this is a really exciting topic. It's going to be open-ended. We're really going to ask what's to come with how devices and media connect. So we're joined by Meghan from Flowcode, and Flowcode is a master of QR code technology. So Meghan, I guess my first question to you is, as QR codes are accessible not only on bus stops, subway sides, television, what are some of the most innovative and creative use you've seen combining a QR code with a device in media and with that performative digital experience?
Absolutely. Well, I love that question because I feel like that's all I'm constantly seeing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so creative and interesting, especially when we look at kind of the nature of where we're working. You know, it's like traditionally maybe antiquated spaces like broadcast or out of home, like we kind of have this idea that, you know, oh, it's passe media or whatever it is, but we're finding that that's quite the opposite. You know, and the reality is that we just get to be the conduit to connection. So we're seeing content creators and brands really leaning into the idea of interactive and shoppable content. As you said, we're kind of adapting universally from a tech standpoint to make that possible. I mean, in 2017, looking at QR specifically, in 2017, our phones adapted to, you know, scan a QR with the native camera app, which is a huge step toward, you know, consumer adoption and QR ubiquity. And now, you know, kind of now that users are easily able to interact with QR and engage with the content that they're viewing, we're seeing brands and content creators execute, you know, everything from immediately shoppable experiences, scan to purchase, We're seeing a lot of users who are doing things like scan to talk to our news anchors, scan to answer this poll question, scan to enter this sweepstakes, and probably the most exciting as we kind of get into the crypto and NFT and Web3 space, we're seeing people do NFT drops via a QR scan in media, and it's kind of really amazing to see the utility of it, from a measurement standpoint, from a conversion standpoint, an audience validation standpoint. That's really very incredible and innovative for these brands. But some of the creativity is magical. I scanned a code for in a car commercial the other day and suddenly had a VR version of that vehicle in my office, which that's such an interesting and interactive way to kind of earn that viewership from your consumer. And the more that we see this kind of adopted across all environments, connecting the big screens, the out-of-home screens, the in-stadium screens, down to the most personal devices that people have, I think you'll be seeing a lot of consumer behavior shifting to expect interactivity and expect a value exchange in all of those environments.
I love that. I love the idea. One of the things that Sean mentioned, I teach, and I just had my class last night, so it's fresh in my mind. What I talk about oftentimes is changing consumer expectations, right? When Amazon started to deliver so quickly, our expectations of what should happen as a consumer completely changed overnight, and we expected that level of engagement. Now, I think that QR codes, and especially with some of the examples that you talked about, users expect some kind of dynamic, some kind of surprise, some kind of delightful experience when they interact. I love that idea of QR to VR, QR to augmented reality. It makes a lot of sense, kind of combining these two technologies. And expecting interactivity, it makes me think of a business like Bambuser. They create these live streaming shopping events, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like QVC or Home Shopping Network, but it's online, right? It's this live shopping event. So I saw one where they were promoting Ted Baker and a new line for Ted Baker. So they had the clothes, they had a model, they had an announcer talk to you about it, and then right to the right side were all the products you could buy. Then, of course, there's chat options. I would imagine that there's QR codes, and talking about, you're the only other guest besides myself that likes to use the word ubiquitous, right? So I love that. So I'm going to throw that out there, which is wonderful.
I love it.
It's a great word. So is this, kind of approach, do you think it's going to become ubiquitous and more accessible for lots of, mid-tier and even enterprise level brands?
I do. So I think we're at this really interesting intersection of consumers wanting instant gratification and brands wanting to prove ROI. And that's not anything new, but the drive to kind of have all of your media be performance media is a very interesting kind of piece of the puzzle because, every single dollar counts coming out of COVID, the understanding how people's behaviors have changed and having this new need to kind of optimize as you go. I think it's really interesting to see, shoppable content serving across screens because it immediately adds that layer of performance to everything. Now, the thing that's super, super fun is, and actually I think almost it's fun and challenging for brands is that I think the lines are really coming down between consumer content sources. Viewers don't turn on their TV and say, okay, I'm going to watch this linear content. Now I'm going to go and watch this OTT content. And now I'm going to do, the behavior flow is so much more seamless where it's just all content is on demand, which makes it really, really important for all of these brands and publishers to have a solid presence in all areas and to make it easy to toggle from place to place. And so the consumer need for instant gratification coming out of COVID and to your point about Amazon, it's like all I need to do is tap a button and 2 hours later my product that I wanted is here. And that need is not going to go away. That's only going to increase. And so these shoppable technologies, you know, the more that you'd be able to kind of, you know, present a bespoke shopping experience, easy instant gratification experience, and then adding in some of that, the bells and whistles that earn viewer loyalty. Like, what if, you know, not only are you able to socially shop Ted Baker, but then, you know, use the QR code on screen to try on the blouse, see a picture of yourself holding the bag. You know, it brings a level of reality to that shopping experience. It makes all of that media performance driven, and it you know, gives you the opportunity to kind of surprise and delight and create a little bit of viewer loyalty there. So I think that you'll see a lot of emergence of technology like that across multiple environments, and ultimately I think you'll start seeing a lot more media planning based on the performance of positions like that, of tech like that.
No, that's wonderful. And I like the idea of that bespoke expectation, right? Because every shopper shops differently. Some people like to go online and then go in store to purchase. Some people like to go in store to try out and then shop online in privacy, right? So I do think that the blend of looking at content with some kind of device and purchasing with some kind of device is going to be an expectation, especially for Generation Z and even Generation Alpha, as they start moving into their own pocketbooks, right, and being able to express their purchase decisions. One of the things you talked about with devices, which came up with a Consumer Electronics Show, is better technology with wearables. So there's a new brand called Nextwear Air, where they're moving kind of in a glasses type of environment. We all know what happened with Google Glass. It was a first mover product, right, which was great. But what they're thinking about with interactivity in the Nextwear space, and with the report that Deloitte had talked about, where kind of the unification of devices, it seems like there's going to be an opportunity for these kinds of wearables for a consumer to find something online, visualize themselves in it, and then actually buy it in that single moment. And to your point, it's not necessarily a broadcast issue, it's not an OTT issue, it's just a media connection to consumer issue.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a power to the people kind of thing, right? It's all about, you know, eliminating the friction between message delivery and action. And, you know, I think if we look at the path that we've followed with consumer electronics, like, think about what cell phones were to us, you know, in 2005 versus what they are now, and how I mean, I read yesterday that Apple discontinued the last version of the iPod, right? So like that, and that seemed so funny to me that just happened yesterday. But like, the idea here is that we are getting closer and closer to the consumer, and wearable tech is really kind of that next step, I think. And, you know, we've foreseen, you know, a few years down the line, you know, again, coming from the QR lens for us is, you know, you're walking down the street wearing your Google glasses or your, you know, Oculus device or whatever it is that's there, and you see out of home with a QR that's basically, let's say for the sake of argument, advertising a beautiful vacation on the beach. And what if you could just look at that billboard or that display and scan through and suddenly be via VR, AR standing on that beach, you know? And so we look at that, and you know, the future iterations of shoppable tech and interactive tech, I think, are going to become more and more kind of ingrained in who we are. And I think wearable tech is kind of that thing. Like, if I can remove the step of having to take, it seems so silly to say it, but take my phone out, open the camera and scan it. While that feels really seamless to us now, fast forward 5 years and it's probably not going to feel that seamless. So.
Absolutely, Megan. And also too, for the consumers who are 10 years old now, 12 years old now, in 8 to 10 years, they'll be driving their own purchasing decisions, right? So in these years, the advances in technology will become commonplace, I think, for this new generation of purchasers coming up. And of course, there's then, right, there's future, which is X number of years away, but there's also future that's happening now, 6-9 months from now. So one of the things that we were hearing about is next gen TV, where there are businesses, there's a business called Run3 TV, where it connects kind of greater interactivity, lead gen, dynamic ad insertions, and this is all an over-the-air environment, right? So it's kind of blending that interactivity of connected TV with broadcast. From what I understand, you just came back from the National Association of Broadcasters show and heard a little bit about this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, a little bit more broadly, I suppose, is the again, kind of hitting back on that need for bespoke and measurable content. There is huge activity in the broadcast space, in the linear space, to really, you know, how do we better optimize what has traditionally been a very like push medium, right? You know, they push content out and it's out into the ether, and then you're waiting on you know, Nielsen ratings to come back so that you can measure how that performed, right? And like with the evolution of measurement and connectivity, it's like, okay, that can't be the standard anymore. And so a very big way around this, it's like this meeting point of earning viewership and getting people to interact with their TV screens, especially with broadcast, because, you know, it's the increase of streaming only households is pretty crazy. So it's a matter of competing and making sure that content is accessible across all of these screens. But the era at NAB was very much about, again, kind of creating a bespoke and measurable content experience back and forth, and you know, really that is such, it has so many interesting implications about, you know, what is on-demand content going to look like? What is traditional content optimization going to look like? And, you know, what is the new standard of measurement? What is the new kind of threshold of judging whether or not content is successful? And I think as we look at shoppability and measurability, I think, you know, the inclusion of smart media and cross-platform media is just going to be taking it to a whole new level. It's a whole different level of accountability in that space, I think, and when it comes to that viewership.
Yeah, you know, and what's interesting about exactly what you talk about with bespoke and measurable content, I think that there's probably nothing more, I'd be hard pressed to think of technology that's more bespoke than your own phone right now, at least, because you get to choose the apps. You get to choose the settings. You get to choose what you see, what you don't see, what you block, what you don't block. I thought it was interesting when, you know, cars now are foregoing a bunch of technology in the console, and they said, oh, let's just use Airplay. It's the easiest thing because your phone is the most recent, you know, personalized device. I couldn't even imagine a time when there isn't necessarily a remote device that you buy with a television and that it's all connected through an app on your phone. That might exist right now, and if it does, if someone is out there where it exists, please let me know. And if it hasn't existed, you heard it here first, and make the idea happen. I won't take credit for it. You got it. But to me, the that idea of bespoke and measurable, I wouldn't be surprised, Megan, if that becomes kind of these pillars and these hallmark concepts moving forward with brands and media. Right? And how do we make things more bespoke? How do we make things more measurable? Because to your point, that creates the consumer and makes them in control, but it also gives the brands the measurement they need to measure performance.
Right. There's no assumption anymore. It's not surveying an audience and then making assumptions based on a very small sample size. It's like, and again, I'm very spoiled working in this space because I get to have this technology that, you know, it's not about delivering, you know, universal content, and it's not even anymore about, you know, making content targeting decisions based on the collective behavior of a household IP address. We're looking at, you know, a technology that allows us to connect with an individual in the household via that most personal device. And so you're absolutely right that, like, you know, when we think about getting closer to the consumer, it's like, is there anything more perfect than somebody seeing your message and immediately bringing you into their digital, universe via that scan. You know, that's really where it comes from. And then thinking about future iterations, understanding that I am not a tech person at all, but thinking about the future iterations of like, well, what can that mean? You know, is that suddenly, you know, the television in the room is able to detect which viewers are watching based on the proximity of this device or based on the proximity of the wearable tech, and then suddenly it's everything from augmented reality showing their favorite anchors delivering the same news story, and that could be different from what their neighbor is viewing next door, or different even from the other adults in the household, and where it's like, how do you just make these slight adjustments to suddenly make all of that content super relevant to that user? And I think, you know, right now we're doing it via optimization and making educated decisions based on that interactivity. But I think the future iterations of it are going to be far more exciting and seamless, right? Where you turn on your TV and everything is designed for you.
I love it. I think that's actually, there's all the roads seem to be indicating that that's definitely a possible future that we're moving towards. That was wonderful. Thank you. What a great conversation. If only we had like, well, I have a cup of coffee, so that was nice. So Johnny, do we have any questions at all from the audience and the participants?
You know, Chris, we do have a couple questions, and I just want to comment myself on one thing that made me kind of scared and laugh at the same time. As a driver in Southern California, Meghan says earlier in this conversation, she can predict that people will be walking down the street wearing their giant clunky ocular devices on their faces. And I'm thinking, man, they can't even walk down the street with their cell phones in their hand. They're hazard to cars. I don't want to know what happens when you have this giant mask of your face and you're just enjoying life a totally different way.
I guess we're gonna hope that the technology evolves enough to be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing or low profile, but we'll see. We'll get
also,
there.
And the self-driving cars will be out there and they'll stop for the pedestrians.
Absolutely.
All right, well said,
we'll all
well
just
said.
like this all the time, and our devices will do everything for us. Right. That's the implication that like we choose to gloss over. You know, the technology
Yeah, of course. There's the caveat there. I got you. So this question's for Meghan. Do you see a lot of clients starting to use QR to drive VR or augmented reality? And if so, is there successful attribution tied to these technologies already?
Yeah. So what's super, super exciting, you know, we see, it's so funny because it's like the AR, VR element sounds so like, ooh, technologically intricate, but we see it everywhere from like, for example, a furniture retailer who is like, hey, shop this collection, you scan the code and you see what the couch looks like in your household, right? It's like a very kind of simple execution, and you know, the attribution metrics that you get from something like that is so interesting because you can match the, you know, in some cases match the mobile device to a purchase to in-store traffic, and like that's a really simple and accessible execution for just about everybody. But then you see some of the more interesting ones, right? Like we have really incredible Snapchat filter launches and like again, NFT capabilities. I think one of the most interesting ones that I saw was an NFT drop that actually they had strategically placed QR around New York, and at the Arch in Washington Square, if you walked up based on the positioning of that QR, if you scanned it, it projected this huge art piece on the side of the wall. And then that because that's, you know, an actionable, savable piece of content, somebody can go on to purchase that NFT. There's a lot of really interesting, like, using that content to push people toward action. And it's just when you have that level of engagement and when you have the utility of AR and VR kind of in the same, like you look at that as one united package, it has so many applications across the board, and the measurement can just be just so incredible. You know, it's
yeah. You know, it's interesting, Meghan. You got me thinking about the fad years ago with the Pokemon.
Yes.
Right, trying to find, because I remember going to Balboa Park here in San Diego. And all of these people were literally walking around like this, and there were hundreds of them, and I didn't quite know. And it was, you know, the augmented reality Pokemon finding. So having a commercial application where you can have those experiences, but also too with geofencing now and beacon technology, you can actually find that device ID and connect it back to that consumer. So the return on ad spend and the measurements are pretty tight on that as well.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
That's a great feedback, guys. Thank you so much. Here's another question for you. It's an interesting demand question. Who's responsible for driving the shift and development of media crossover devices? Is it the manufacturers, perhaps the brands, maybe the consumers, or is it a little bit of everybody?
I think it's everybody.
Question. I think it's a little bit of everybody too. I think, you know, I use that phrase a lot, like power to the people or go where the eyeballs go. I think that the writing is on the wall just in terms of like, I mean, look at, I think about this all the time, about being a consumer and saying, gee, I really wish that I could, I use this again from a QR perspective, of like, I wish that it was easier for me to shop that commercial that I'm looking at, or I wish that it was easier for me to, you know, bookmark this event, or like whatever the action is, where we have all of these different pieces of technology that are designed to solve for one part of that equation. And as like these tech companies, as the like manufacturers, the device side of things are evolving, it's all designed to eliminate the friction. And so as where I'll push back is on Deloitte saying one device to rule them all. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think there's always going to be a difference between like big rectangle, little rectangle being the phone, big rectangle being the TV. I think there's always going to be like a difference in the type of attention that you're getting on that device. But I do think that we'll constantly be seeing evolutions of this tech in response to consumers saying, I want this to be easier. I want to shop this, and you know, the constant need for there to be ROI and things like that. Brands are going to constantly want to push for the things that consumers are demanding. So I feel like there's just a lot in the mix, and it comes from kind of all facets of that.
Yeah,
group.
I love that answer, Megan. And when I think back of the introduction of the iPhone, you know, the idea was I'm going to show them something they never knew they always wanted, right? As a device, it's kind of true. We never knew we wanted an iPhone, but the latent need of the consumer was, I want to take my computer functionality with me everywhere, right? So I didn't even know what that looked like from a phone perspective, but I knew what I wanted internally, right? I knew what I desired. Whether the form and the function of that is going to be up to those manufacturers, but I think that they have a much better understanding now of what those consumers are going to want. I also think too that smarter minds than myself are really studying Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and they know that what we do know for a fact is that Gen Z is going to be the largest consumer group by 2025, and so they have a whole set of characteristics and behaviors that are kind of these predominant characteristics of that generation, and so that's going to then, I think, apply to that next generation coming up, Generation Alpha. And you've got, guarantee it, you've got product developers and product marketers and technologists and Samsung and Sony and LG drawing on a whiteboard and getting feedback from their marketing research team saying, here's what the 12-year-olds want, here's what the 13-year-olds want, here's what the 20-year-olds want, and they're building for that. So I think it's the ecosystem now is one where the various parts of the ecosystem inform the other parts.
Agreed.
Solid answer. Thank you, guys. Let's got time for one more question. I'm going to throw this at you. It's kind of a prediction question. It says, what do you predict will be the biggest change in this space over the next 5 years?
I'm going to give a biased answer. I think you're going to see QR in everything, and that it's not going to be an afterthought, but rather, you know, kind of, you know, to use the word ubiquitous, at least in this space where people are going to almost expect that it's there. And I'll tell you, it's already starting to happen. I was sitting next to a stranger at a restaurant who was watching TV, and he turned to me and he said, you know, I don't know why every commercial doesn't have a QR code in it. And I was like, you know what, sir, me too. So I think that that's definitely something. And again, even with the rate which technology is evolving, I think that you're going to see even more seamless executions of the same thing, right? So we make everything clickable via a QR scan. What about when it's just, you know, a tone that comes out of your TV that prompts an action on your phone, you know, that you can open and tap if you're interested in it or something like that. You know, it's just the constant evolution of removing the friction and making the action even easier. So shorter term QR and everything, longer term, who knows?
Yeah. I think maybe my one prediction would be that a device that is like the phone, but not quite a phone itself as we know it now. Still, people make phone calls, which is fine. But I also know that people can talk to their wristbands. It could be an ear device, right? It could be something to where it's a smaller physical device, but it has projections. And I mean, everyone has seen it, you know, in the Iron Man movies, all the various visual projections that you can interact with. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And then when that happens in the space, to Megan's point, imagine you pull up, or you tap on a virtual QR code, and it pulls up an item, and you can spin the item around and you can buy it. You can do various things that you want. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the next X number of years.
That is a bold but fun prediction. And I know that you're a big time comic book guy for movies, and I can see that dream coming true for you. So that's pretty cool. Let me jump back in here, guys, and we'll close this thing out together. Awesome session. Seriously, guys. Meghan, Chris, what a great conversation. I went into this not knowing a lot about this topic, and I came out feeling like I know a lot more than I knew, and I actually recognized that I knew a lot that I didn't understand, which is very, very cool. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to join us for our next episode of the PDMI Take 20, hosted Wednesday, May 25th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'd also like to remind you that the PDMI's fall conference, PDMI West, is scheduled for October 24th through October 26th in San Diego at the Hard Rock Hotel. Both registration and housing are now open. So get those badges, get those rooms, and we'll see you down in San Diego together. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Make it a great day, and look forward to next time together. Thank you.
Bye-bye.